Hi everyone, I'm Lim Ha Chen from Wenzhou Ursuline University of Languages, Kaohsiung, Taiwan. The title of my study is The Impact of a 5-Day English Summer Camp on the Conceptions of English Learning of EFL Elementary Students in Taiwan. Here is the agenda of my presentation. So, what is conception of learning? Conceptions of learning refer to one's understanding of what learning is and to the interpretation of what the learning objectives, learning processes, and learning activities are to oneself. How is a conception of learning formed? It is formed from the accumulation of experiences of a particular phenomenon in a particular environmental context. This means that the conceptions of learning are constructed on one's own from personal experiences or specifically through personal learning experiences. Learning is unique to individuals and it is also context dependent. Previous research has found 6 conceptions of learning that are consistently held by learners across different cultures. They are increasing knowledge, memorizing, applying knowledge, understanding meaning, interpreting something in a different way, changing as a person. These 6 conceptions of learning can be grouped according to 2 opposing approaches, the quantitative and the qualitative. Increasing knowledge, memorizing, and applying knowledge are considered to be quantitative in nature, which involves a superficial understanding of what learning is. In contrast, understanding meaning and interpreting something in a different way are qualitative conceptions that represent a deeper understanding of what learning is. Some other conceptions of learning found are learning as understanding and applying, and learning occurs through exploratory practice, learning to learn, and motivation. Just now, I talked about conceptions of learning in general. Then what are some studies of conceptions of learning that are done on the domain of EFL or of elementary students? It seems that only a few studies have explored the conceptions of learning in the domains of English as a foreign language or of elementary students. A recent study by Wang and Chai 2012 explored Taiwan elementary school students' conception of learning through students' drawing. The study found that the students mainly represented traditional conceptions of learning. They often depicted a learning scenario where they sat in a classroom and listened to the teacher. Nevertheless, this study did not explore students' conception of learning in any specific domains, but the results revealed that Chinese and mathematics were perceived as the main contents of learning. The purpose of this study is to explore the impact of a 5-day English summer camp activity provided by college EFL student teachers on students' conception of English language learning. My 2 research questions are: what are elementary students' conception of English language learning before and after the English summer camp? Are there any changes in students' conception of English language learning after the English summer camp? If so, what are they? This study was conducted during a 5-day English summer camp. There were 6 student teachers who were in their 3rd year of college. The target elementary school was located in a remote area in Kaohsiung where no public transportation was available. The school had only 6 classes, one at each level, each with around 20 students, which was relatively small compared to schools in urban areas that can have more than 15 classes at each level. Formal English classes were provided starting from grade 3 onwards. Before the English summer camp took place, the target elementary school recruited 54 of the students aged between 6 and 12 to join this summer camp. They were divided into 3 levels, 1 to 3, each of which reflected increasing English difficulty. The student teachers decided 6 40-minute English lessons at each level using the communicative language teaching approach and the PPP approach to language teaching. Teaching techniques like total physical response and audiolingual methods were also involved. The topics were related to students' daily life and school environment. The aims of the lessons were to enhance students' motivation to learn English and to cultivate students' confidence in speaking English. In this study, only 32 elementary students in Level 2, 7 males and 10 females aged 9 to 10, and Level 3, 7 males and 8 females aged 10 to 12 were involved. Students at Level 1 were excluded due to their young age and their more limited ability to express their thoughts clearly. In general, the students thought that learning English was interesting prior to and after the English camp. The concept of phenomenography was adopted in this study. It is often used to explore people's thinking and learning, and in the study of the conception of teaching and learning. It is a non-intrusive way to study the idea of learning. In this study, a pre-survey questionnaire and a post-survey questionnaire with prompts were given to the participants. The prompts were under 3 categories: way of learning, acquisition of knowledge, and application. The description of the experience of learning were collected and were put into qualitatively different categories to identify different conceptions of learning. This study found that the most prominent conception of English learning among students across the levels, both prior to and after the English summer camp, was English is to be learned through diverse activities, which is under the category of way of learning. At Level 2, the 2 other more popular conceptions of English learning prior to and after the camp were learning English is to apply or use English in daily life, in the category of application, and learning English is to accumulate experience, in the category of acquisition of knowledge. After the English summer camp, there were some changes in the students' conceptions of English learning. The most obvious change was the increase in responses in the category of ways of learning. In the table, you can see items from the category ways of learning that had an increase of more than 20%. The following 2 tables show the most common conceptions of English learning which were held by more than half the students prior to and after the English summer camp. The conceptions at Level 2 were more diverse after the camp, but mainly in the category ways of learning. Here are the common conceptions prior to and after the summer camp at Level 3. In this study, most of the elementary students perceived English language learning in terms of ways of learning. In particular, English is to be learned through diverse activities was the most prevalent conception, both prior to and after the English summer camp. This means that when it comes to English language learning, the student did not expect a traditional way of learning where they just sat in a classroom and listened to the teachers. Whereas Wang and Chai's study 2012 found that when no domain areas were attached, Taiwanese elementary students mainly represented traditional conceptions of learning. It suggests that students' learning experiences in a particular subject domain are unique and therefore may lead to different kinds of conceptions. After the English camp, the Level 2 students were concerned more about ways of learning. It seems that new knowledge of English language learning was constructed after this 5-day English learning experience. They appeared to realize that there could be different ways to learn English in the classroom. For example, English is to be learned through diverse teaching methods. English is to learn through speaking English. English is to learn through repetitive practice methods. And English is to be learned in a fun way. Furthermore, the students were more aware that learning English enhances their English listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. When the conceptions of English language learning between Level 2 and Level 3 were compared, the Level 2 students seemed to possess more diverse conceptions than those at Level 3. At Level 2, more than half of the students perceived English language learning both before and after the English summer camp in terms of learning English is to accumulate experience in the category of knowledge acquisition. Learning English is to apply or use English in daily life in the category of application. And English is to be learned through diverse activities in the category of ways of learning. However, the conceptions of students at Level 3 mainly fell into the category of ways of learning, both before and after the camp. This is consistent with the finding in Wang and Chai's 2012 study, where students' conceptions of learning became more monotonous as their learning experiences increased. It might be that the Level 3 students' conceptions of English language learning have become more consolidated as their English learning experiences have increased, and they might be less susceptible to change. This short exposure to a particular English learning activity might not be sufficient to have a big impact on the existing conceptions of English language learning. The results of this study show that the students' conceptions of learning were mainly limited to the classroom context and at a quantitative level. Qualitative conceptions of learning were not observed among these elementary students. It could be that the development of qualitative conceptions is related to age. After this learning experience, more than half of the students at both Level 2 and Level 3 perceived that English is to be learned through repetitive practice. The increase was more than 20% for both levels. This suggests that the students might have experienced a lot of repetitive practice involving this learning experience. This is a reasonable assumption as the audiolingual method was used in the English lessons in the camp. This experience might have given them a strong impression about English language learning. Pratt, 1992, stated that a conception is formed from the accumulation of experiences of a particular phenomenon in a particular environmental context. Therefore, if students were exposed to a greater variety of English language learning contexts besides the classroom over a longer period of time, and if teachers could provide more English language learning experiences that involved a deeper level of learning, students might generate different conceptions of learning, and qualitative conceptions could be formed. With regard to the design of English summer camp or any English learning activities at the elementary level, learning activities should be more diverse inside and outside school, and not limited to drills. This should be aimed at encouraging students to realize the reasons for learning English, which are not limited to academic success, and what changes it could bring them. Thank you very much for your listening. This is the end of my presentation. The following slides are the references.